Good, good. I'm sure that other people will join as we go along. So let's get started in terms of the campaign. Firstly, this strategy, subject for a lot of debate about why are we not doing rallies, why are we not doing t-shirts, and the normal way of doing politics in Zimbabwe. You know, I've covered, or we, in fact, the team and I have been pretty well all over the country, not yet everywhere, but let me just share with you where we've been, which is quite considerable. We've been to Marondera, to Rusape, Chinoi, Banket, Karoi, Kariba, Nyazura, Wedza, Dorowa, Murambinda, Buhera, and surrounding areas, Nika Growth Point in Bikita, Chiredzi, Triangle, Jerera Growth Point in Zaka, Mpandawana in Gutu, Chivu, and Masvingo. And these places, incidentally, are like the nodes where we've been. But as we travel between these places, we stop wherever there are people and chat with people, ask them what is going on in their lives, what is top of mind for them, and give them an opportunity to share with us their own concerns. And our view on this exercise is that the people out there in many ways are tired of leadership that talks to them. They are looking for leaders who create an opportunity to be interrogated by society, for us to hear what they've got to say. It's not about what we think and about what concerns us and what we guess is concerning them. It's about us actually hearing them through their own voice, through them articulating how they perceive things to be. And I have to say that the experience of going around talking to people has convinced me more than ever that the proper way to campaign is not through rallies, not at all. The proper way to campaign, if we are really concerned about people rather than preaching to them, concerned about listening to their voice, is to go to where they are. Don't call them to a meeting. Incidentally, they've also given us feedback that when people are called to a rally, it costs them time and money to go to a rally. Whereas the way we are doing it, we are going and finding people where they live, in their daily lives. We go to them. It's like a door-to-door campaign, door-to-door not necessarily in terms of residents, but where people are already engaged in their own daily lives. So they are not expending too much in terms of time and money, going to some location in huge numbers, investing a lot of their resources, if you like, but we are going to them. And the feedback we're getting is that this is being appreciated greatly. So that's the first observation. What are the other insights that we're getting from this experience? The first one, I have to say, I am a bit, call it partly surprised by just how much damage has happened in our country. Let me give you an example. On Monday, I was in Masvingo. The team and I went around Masvingo. It was Monday morning, so all morning right up to lunch, just after lunchtime, we went around different locations in Masvingo. So lots of people, young people, typically young men, actually to be more precise, sitting, playing games. But what was absolutely disturbing for me, in every single situation, every single case, these young people, on a Monday, a work day, they were not at work. Unsurprisingly, because clearly we know where we are in terms of unemployment rates. But what was really worrisome, that in spite of it being in the morning, they were already drunk on something or other. I say something or other because it's not obvious to me whether it was alcohol or drugs, but they were absolutely high on something. I came away very disturbed that we've got a disaster on our hands. And from what I gather, I have to stress that I gather I've got no first-hand evidence, is that some of this behavior is actually been induced and encouraged by ZANU in particular, feeding these people intoxicants and then giving them an agenda to go and cause havoc in their own country with the excuse that they're being targeted at opposition. I think this is not a good place to be. So we've got a country that is more damaged than I had evidence of before, than I had reason to believe that we are where we are. My way of engaging by going around this way, not calling people to a rally, means we are getting, I think, a better feel for where this country is, because we are visiting people where they live on a daily basis. Nothing is, they don't know I'm coming, incidentally. I find them where they are and the way they live. So there is nothing that has been sanitized about what we are seeing. I would really urge all of us to think long and hard about what we are going to do, all of us together, because I think we've got a bigger problem than I at least really understood in terms of the damage to the fabric of our society that has happened because of lack of employment. These young people, without the inducements I was talking about of them being used as instruments to fight inter-party issues, the fundamental issue, they've got no jobs. They are not gainfully employed. So they resort to the only thing to entertain themselves, which is drugs and alcohol, and literally 7 days a week. This is disastrous for our society. And I really think if we are being responsible, we need to begin to see the evidence that any government, whatever government of the day, if we believe in democracy, we ought to have the discipline to say, at the moment, President Mnangagwa is running this country, ZANU is running this country. I accept that as a Democrat and as a law-abiding citizen. He is my president. I'm going to contest, but at the moment, he is my president. I want to see evidence from my president and from my government that they are awake to the challenges and the problems that beset our country. And I don't think the evidence I have to date demonstrates that. So that's my first issue. That we've got a bigger problem than I thought we had. I am not seeing a government that is showing the sensitivity and prioritization of dealing with these issues in the manner that I would have expected. So, ladies and gentlemen, we really do have a problem, and we need to think long and hard about how our society is going to be reconstructed. Incidental on this point, let me just digress a little bit. I'll come back to this issue later on, but let me touch on it right away. It also worries me a lot when I see a government that thinks that our challenge at the moment is about convincing the outside world to re-engage with Zimbabwe. This is not priority number one, not at all. Priority number one is for us to rebuild our society. Because remember that if we are being honest to ourselves, we destroyed our society, we destroyed our country. The outside world did not destroy this country. We, as Zimbabweans, destroyed our own country primarily through corruption and nepotism. And therefore, step number one is an internal issue for us to rebuild the foundations of our society. Because for as long as we don't have those foundations, the world will never really engage with us appropriately. We don't respect our own people. Why would anybody else respect us? The scenario I've just described, what is going on with our young people, shows we do not care enough about our people. Why do we think it's an outsider, investor, donor, or whoever else to come and rebuild our society? It is our responsibility. And I would like to insist that I want to see my government of the day beginning to show that it understands this. and that our president stops running around the world, but rather stays at home and attends to the rebuilding of our society. So I will get back to this issue when I talk about the economy. So in fact, let me move on to that. That's a good segue. So there is a lot of talk about FDI. I am, as you know, a financier. I've grown up most of my working life as a banker. Let me tell you some fundamental issues about FDI or investment as a whole. Investment comes when people have got confidence about our country, confidence about how we behave ourselves. The starting point, therefore, is not to go running after other people's money. The starting point is for us to demonstrate how we manage the resources, no matter how little, that are our own resources. At the moment, there is nothing we are doing which gives confidence to other people that if they were to give us their resources, we would manage them in a manner that demonstrates responsibility and understanding of priorities and ownership of the agenda and ownership of responsibility. We think it is somebody else's job. It can never be. Incidentally, there is an issue also which people who don't understand finance don't recognize. There is a risk involved in borrowing money. In financial terms, we call it leverage. The extent to which you borrow money, the more money you borrow, depending on how much you are leveraging it on your own resources, creates risk. So if you borrow too much on the basis of very low resources of your own, it means when something goes wrong with your economy and it doesn't produce enough revenue for you to be able to service those obligations, you will either default, or if it's in business, your assets will be taken away to service that debt. So there is an issue of risk involved in borrowing. But let me also highlight in something that will be familiar to you all, I hope. The leverage I'm talking about does not only apply to debt, it also applies to donor resources. And what that means is the more money you get given by donors and the more you allow your economy to depend on donor resources in a manner that is disproportionate to what yourself are putting in there. The minute you disagree with them on priorities, on what should happen, and they decide to withhold that support, what happens to your economy? It goes belly up. So let's again not get overexcited about the support either from borrowing, which is normal leverage, or from donor support as a matter of interest, because it also represents risk. Some of you may remember this happened to Malawi. Malawi at some point disagreed with donors because of its policies. I think it was about agriculture. Peter Mutharika, not Peter, but his brother, disagreed with donors in terms of prioritization. And they literally brought Malawi to a standstill, its economy. Remember what happened to Uganda. Uganda went through a democratic process, through its parliament, debated the whole issue of gay marriages, and through a democratic process came out with a position which was at variance with what donors wanted. And the donors then said, guys, we're not giving you support. And again, this created a huge problem. Look at what is happening to Mozambique as we speak. So let's be very clear about it is good to work with development partners. It is good to be credit worthy and go and borrow money. But we should never forget that the platform that gives you the credibility to do all of these things are your own resources and your own behavior in managing the resources that you have, no matter how little they are. So let's please understand this issue of the risks involved in leverage, either through borrowing or through donor support. So when you hear a leader, and I'm not going to name names, getting too excited about billions coming from outside without first paying attention to how much and how well we manage our own resources, you must worry. You absolutely must worry. You must understand they do not understand how an economy works. They don't understand the vulnerability of a country to borrowing and a donor support. If they understand, they will be much more measured in terms of the excitement, the evidence in this donor support. So that's the issue of destabilization, possible leverage issues. So when we talk about employment and FDI, let's also remember that when we're looking at the levels of unemployment, we ought to be paying attention to something else. We ought to be thinking about how we're going to support our own entrepreneurs. Our economy cannot be built and totally dependent on people who are employed by somebody else. We need to be developing an economy, yes, where some people are employees, but a lot of our citizens ought to be encouraged and supported to become entrepreneurs who create jobs in their own right. And I listen to a lot of my protagonists, if you like, and the issue of supporting entrepreneurs is hardly ever touched upon. There is a lot of excitement about donor support, about FDI, as opposed to understanding that a balanced economy has to include within itself entrepreneurial activity and effort from our own people, because that's the biggest resource we have. So again, let's understand, agriculture is another thing that we need to pay attention to, because we as a country are well endowed with agricultural land. And we must understand that our mismanagement of a very credible exercise of land redistribution is misfired largely. And we need to go back to basics and say, we need to own up to what went wrong. We need to be prepared to iron out the wrinkles in the implementation of that policy. We need to look at where it is we, not other people, not development partners, but we as Zimbabweans using our own resources and our own expertise and competencies. What is it we ought to be doing to make sure that our agriculture is resuscitated, our entrepreneurs are supported, we set up maybe a private equity kind of support, not debt financing for our entrepreneurs. These are the things we need to be discussing about our economy. Not what I hear all the time about what the outside world can do for us. We are responsible for forming the foundation. We are responsible for making sure that we're not overexposed. We are responsible for the fact that we do not end up making our economy and our country and our citizens very vulnerable to what happens outside our own country. So, quite a touchy issue. We as APA have often mentioned that our government has become too big for the economy that we've got at the moment. Our budget tells us that, in the sense that more than 90%, about 95, 97% of our budget goes to paying civil servants. So we are going to have to come up, and all of us agree, that our civil service needs to be reduced. Am I threatening civil servants? The answer is no, I'm not. I want us to work together with the civil servants to come up with a scheme which handholds them and which is phased to give them a soft landing. What does that look like? What could that look like as an example, so that there is absolute clarity? I'm not careless in the sense of thinking that you can walk in and the next day you simply fire people and say, civil servants, you've got no jobs. You don't do that. One way in which we could do this, as an example, we could do a structured down-phasing of numbers of civil servants. In the first year, as an example, we could say whatever civil servants we are oversized by in terms of numbers which are completely out of proportion, make them go home, stay at home, but we pay them. We say for the first year, we'll let you, in other words, you go home, you can do what you like, go and start a business, maybe look at the way land ought to be dealt with, include that in the packaging of how we give them a soft landing. But for the first year, we pay them 100% of the salary they were on. But they are now not coming to work. They are at home getting paid 100% of their salary. The second year, however, we do a deal with them and say, second year, we're going to reduce your salaries. Because we expect that in the first year when you were being paid 100% of your salary, you were finding something which should begin to kick in your second year. Maybe we'll pay you somewhere between 50 and 75% of your salary that you were on. And we reduce it in a phased way until we get 0 to in year 4, year 5. It may sound like a strange thing to say you pay people who are not coming to work in a managed reduction of the civil service way, but actually it is not. There are a lot of other costs that are incurred by people coming to work. There is space that you won't need, therefore you can reduce that cost. There is a lot of cost to do with use of telephones, lots of costs used to do with acquiring of vehicles, you know, our appetite for things like that. A lot of costs in terms of running and maintaining those vehicles, which would be, although we are paying them 100% of their salary in the first year and then reducing it, but there are other ways in which we would immediately begin to reduce the cost of the civil service. And I think those civil servants in turn ought to understand that the economic space which will open up will actually allow them to get other options which will sustain them in a manner which shows responsibility on all our parts, them and ourselves included, to make sure that we recalibrate the base on which our economy sits. So this is just an example of what could be done. So we need to be very innovative, very imaginative, but not careless. As a government, we are responsible for looking after our people, all of them, civil service included. It is not their fault that they were being given jobs which don't exist. And we cannot therefore just let them loose and say, go fend for yourselves. We've got to come up with a scheme where as we reduce the size, we are looking after them and hand-holding them. So that's one example. So that's the economy. Those are the things I wanted to touch on about the economy. Issue of leverage, issue of vulnerability to borrowing and too much donor support without a base of our own. Issue of we need to absolutely correct size our civil service, make it fit for purpose. The issue of what we should be doing with our agriculture. But lastly, let me touch on industrialization. People just again talk about, oh, industry, industrialization and bring back industry. But there is quite a lot of thought which needs to go into how we are going to do this. How do we make Zimbabwean industries come back and in a manner in which they are competitive globally? Can we really just across the board say we are going to resuscitate Zimbabwean industries without thinking carefully about global competitiveness? Whether we like it or not, we've got huge exposure and connectivity to the global economy. We are not isolated. What goes on out there has got a huge impact on how we can do things. The degrees of freedom, if you like, that we have in restructuring our economy, our industries, resuscitating them, is going to be directly related to our understanding of global competitiveness. So here is my view of what we ought to be doing. As we begin to think about resuscitating our industries, we need to engage our neighbors in terms of economic integration in a very imaginative way. We happen to be fortunate as Zimbabwe, and because of our history of the liberation struggle. If you go to Tanzania, look at Zambia, look at Mozambique. These countries, these three countries in particular, you've got a common history of the liberation struggle where we supported each other. The sequencing doesn't matter, who went first and so on and so on. But we failed to use the foundation of that solidarity in creating imaginative industries of scale, which can become globally competitive as opposed to minuscule country-defined industries. So again, let me illustrate so that you don't think I'm talking theoretically. In Zimbabwe, if I take a company like Dunlop in Bulawayo, if you want to resuscitate Dunlop, I think it's foolhardy, firstly, to think that Dunlop, the foreign investor, will come and set up a modern factory to manufacture tires just for Zimbabwe. It does not happen anymore, ladies and gentlemen. Understand this. And if they did, the economies involved in terms of the capital requirement of that investment would make it very difficult for them to get a return on that investment. The unit cost on the basis of the investment required would just make it uncompetitive. But if, on the other hand, you went to Tanzania, Mozambique, Zambia, Malawi, and included Zimbabwe, and if we are lucky at a stretch, take Botswana and South Africa. I'm not going to go into detail as to why I say if you're lucky, but if I take these countries and cluster them together and say to them, listen guys, let's do a deal. If I manufacture tires in Bulawayo, I want to do a deal where none of you, the other countries, manufactures tires. Dunlop, Zimbabwe supplies tires for the sub-region. But you can only do that if you then have a reciprocity which says, Mozambique, we look at your competitive advantage. What is it that you could do in Mozambique to supply, again, the same cluster of countries, so that we create a mutuality, mutual benefit, but economies of scale that are competitive, where the unit cost of whatever we're doing, we redefine what is the domestic market. That's what that kind of architecture says. That's why the EU exists today. That's why Brexit is such a big deal. Already when you listen, people are beginning to wonder whether that was a wise move, because the inclusion in a bigger domestic market creates the opportunity for value chains, at least at a sub-regional level, and it reduces unit cost to make you globally competitive. That's how I would do reindustrialization of our country. Clearly, not every commodity or everything you manufacture is subject or is subject to that kind of logic of economies of scale. But there is a lot that we can do with that kind of imagination, architecture to create competitiveness. That's how we ought to be thinking. Zimbabwe cannot afford today, with its 15 million people, to think it can create viability on creating industries that are purely Zimbabwean, where Zimbabwe is the market. This is something of the past. Ladies and gentlemen, if you really understand where the world is moved to, you understand finance, you understand how industries work, you understand economies of scale, that's how you have to begin to think. And we need a leadership that understands these things. And people will often say, oh, it depends on what team you form. You can have somebody who doesn't understand these things leading our country, provided they assemble a good team below them, this will work. This is bullshit. I'm sorry to use that kind of language. It's total nonsense. You cannot, the experience shows us that leaders, by the way, I've got first-hand experience. Remember that I went into President Mugabe's cabinet and I tried to explain these things to him, and guess what happened? He did not understand it, he did not accept it, and that's why I left, and that's why our country is where it is today. I've tried it once, and I'm not trying it again. I will not be led by somebody who does not understand how these things work. And I think we do ourselves a huge disfavor when we choose leaders where we think they're going to be led bottom up. The leader of a team has to have a comprehension of the things I'm describing. The financial issues. Even if you are not an accountant and you cannot compile financials yourself, you have to be able to understand how finance works. You have to be able to understand what present valuation means. When you're selling assets, privatizing, and so on, you have to be able to understand what people are saying to you in order to make sense of it. You have to be able to understand what leverage means. If you don't, I can guarantee you that we're going to sell the assets of our country very cheaply because we're being led by the wrong people. So, ladies and gentlemen, understand as you prepare to vote what is at stake here. Let me come to the issue of the liquidity crisis. The liquidity crisis. So let's start with banking. I don't know how many of you are aware that there is no bank in the world, not one, that can withstand a concerted run on it. In other words, what do I mean by that? If the people who deposit money in a bank, all of them lose confidence in the bank and demand their money back in one go, every single bank in the world would go bust. Every single one of them. Why am I telling you this? I'm telling you this so that you understand what finance is about. Most financial structures and instruments are about confidence. Confidence. That's why our country today suffers from a liquidity crisis. You and I know that as you go around, there is money in this economy, but that money is not going into the official system. It's not going into banks. People would rather keep that money in mattresses and wherever else. Not because there is no money, but because there is no confidence in the people leading this country. There is no evidence that they understand how that money is secured. The evidence is that a government puts expenditure ahead of creating an economy that creates wealth. The ordinary person understands this. My money, when exposed to this circumstance, is going to be less valuable as time goes on. So why will I expose it? When I want my own money from a bank, I'm told it's not there. Why would I go and put it in a bank? And this is a confidence issue. So I have heard people, oh, let's go and adopt the rand and so on and so on. It's got nothing to do with which currency you adopt. Our country suffers at the moment from a lack of confidence in the people running this economy. And as a result, money is not going to go back into the banks. It is just not going to go there. That's why, look at this. We were forced to use a useless piece of paper called the bond note. But even that, we've hit a liquidity crisis because nobody actually believes in this system. Ladies and gentlemen, unless you get an appreciation that there is a certain basic appreciation of economic reality and what makes an economy tick, things called confidence and sentiment, which make economies work, a demonstration by leadership that they know what they're talking about. Not people promising things that are not feasible. When we understand that, you will see people begin to say, oh, okay, I can trust these people and therefore I can put my money in the bank. And the money will come back into the official system. For as long as that confidence does not exist, I can assure you the liquidity will exist in the informal system, not in the formal system. So confidence is a huge building block to how the financial system works. Confidence in the institutions, credibility of those institutions, credibility of the people who run them, gives you the confidence to use the institutions and the instruments that a country issues to the consumers of that country. The last two things about our economy, which I want to touch on, liquidity issues, are part of what has killed the confidence of our people in our country and our leadership is just the issue of corruption. How do we get into a point where we get a list of companies publicized, where companies are called externalization, where those companies externalized following rules which the central bank was supervising? What kind of nonsense is that? So the central bank lays out rules, companies take money out, and that money they are taking out is actually known because they are following rules which are being supervised by the central bank. So if in fact retroactively we decide that they did something wrong, was it the companies or the central bank, the supervisor, who went wrong? Was the central bank inept to let things or to make rules that did not make sense? Again, we need to understand that we are being fed a lot of things which don't make sense. And unless you understand what the rules were and how the financial system works, and if these companies actually committed a crime, why are people not being arrested and being taken to a court of law to demonstrate they broke the law? They are not being arrested because the truth of the matter is a lot of them did not commit a crime. They followed the rules which were laid down, and now they are being used as scapegoats to explain something that is totally not correct in terms of why we are where we are. Corruption is a major issue. Let me touch another issue which is broadly affects our economy. You know, this is a fascinating country. We pride ourselves of a highly educated population, high literacy rates, demonstrated by the fact that Zimbabweans have been able to survive in spite of the many years of abuse that we've been subjected to. To be fair, not just ZANU and President Mugabe. Our abuse as a people goes all the way back to Ian Smith. But it's fascinating, isn't it, that in spite of all of this, we've got a population that is so imaginative and so creative that our families have continued to find a way to both educate our children, for our children to get jobs globally, not just in Zimbabwe, globally, to support us. But look at what we do at home. When I listen to some of our representatives talking about the things I'm discussing with you tonight, I'm ashamed. And I find it difficult to match what I'm hearing, the caliber of the people in whose hands we put our institutions, and this pride we have about how educated our country is, literacy and what have you. So domestically, the two things don't match. The evidence and quality of our leaders and the people who we entrust to run our institutions does not make sense. This education only makes sense once you start going outside Zimbabwe and then seeing how well Zimbabweans are able to hold their own in other countries, whether it's the UK, whether it's South Africa, whether it's Botswana, wherever we've been able to demonstrate we can hold our own. We are professionals. We've got an amazing work ethic. But guess what we do at home? Those same people who demonstrate their capacity globally are not accepted at home. And then we are surprised when our country and our economy and our institutions are performing so badly. We take third-rate people and entrust our institutions to them. I want us as citizens to accept a responsibility. We've got a huge opportunity, unique in many ways, because it starts with how we vote. If we continue to be prepared to vote for third-rate leadership and expect to get first-rate, first-world solutions to our challenges, then something is wrong with us. Something is wrong. We are not accepting the responsibility and the opportunity to take those people we've alienated, who are running other people's countries, and say to them, guess what? We now acknowledge the error of our ways. We've erred here. Come back home. We will now entrust our institutions to you, our country to you. Run it and make it succeed the same way that you're making other people's economies succeed. We can do this. But where we start from is the top leadership. I can assure you, we know as a fact, and it's fascinating for me, the examples are everywhere. In sport, a football team that is not performing, the manager gets fired. It's everywhere. A coach who is not performing, evidenced by the results of the team or even individuals. I'm a golfer. I've got a coach. I'm not performing. I fire them and get another one. Why do we think that Zimbabwe as a country is different? We will never succeed for as long as we are prepared to settle for third-rate people in running our institutions and in running our country. We need to be blunt to ourselves. We need to be honest with ourselves and accept that the responsibility lies with us. For as long as we accept this issue of second-rate, third-rate performers, we are going to get third-rate results. The two are correlated. They depend on each other. Now, so that we have time for questions, let me just touch on a couple of issues on the current situation. I have before talked about this issue of buying cars for chiefs as illustrative of our lack of any sense of prioritization. Total lack of understanding. At the moment, we are in the grip of a crisis in the health sector. The doctors have gone on strike. They've said, guys, we are not going to take responsibility for the loss of life where it then looks like we are irresponsible. We are not good professionals. Whereas the truth is we are not being given the tools with which to do our job. That's essentially what they're saying. You are putting us in a position where our lack of delivery is going to come across to the citizens of this country as if we are irresponsible and incompetent. But the truth is you are not giving us the tools with which to do our job. The teachers at the moment, we sort of on the verge of another conflict in that sense. But it is at this very time where we see people talking about things which don't make sense to me in terms of understanding prioritization. Behavior and spending of money on things, again, which just do not demonstrate an understanding of the concept of living within your own means before you can convince other people to come and support you. So I think that the doctor's issue, the teacher's issue, is an opportunity for us to stop and think and try to recalibrate about prioritization in order not so much to convince the world. We need to take a different approach to this. The world should support us because we are doing for ourselves what is right. We should not be doing it in order to convince the world. We should be doing it because it makes sense and it is right. Then the world actually, because they want to associate with success and rationality, they'll come to our support if we are perceived to be doing the right things. I want to maybe end on a couple of things. Yesterday, I went and attended the launch of the People's Own Voice, or POVO for short, of independent candidates, young people who've got together and say, go out there and contest for council positions as independent candidates. I went there because, for me, this is a huge development and a positive development. This will give, I think, Zimbabweans an opportunity to rethink the issue of quality versus just anybody because they belong to an umbrella called a party. And if we do it right, it will make us shift. Even political parties will be forced to now... we're back. Apologies about that. There is a storm around here, so there is a bit of interference with the network. But I think we're back. So I was saying the POVO initiative, which I went to attend because I support the initiative, is a huge opportunity for us as citizens and the people who vote to use our vote to support the concept of independence. And the reason why this is important, hopefully it will make us think through looking at individual quality of candidates rather than saying, I vote for a party, irrespective of the caliber of the candidate. We are where we are because for the past 38 years, we voted for a party and we continue to want to vote for a party irrespective of the caliber of the candidates. So from now on, I hope that these young people who've said, we are here and we're not just going to continue to protest. We are coming before you and offering you as citizens, and this one was just for Harare, we are offering you as citizens the opportunity to begin to distinguish between the caliber and the merit of candidates and forget about what party I belong, what platform I belong to. I hope that the citizens of this city will think long and hard and be able to support candidates on the basis of the merit that they present, the opportunity they present. So let's start with the presidency. We should use exactly the same approach. We are lucky because our constitution allows us to vote for each individual. We don't have a list system like South Africa. So we can actually segment these things. Vote for the president who we believe to be the right person. Vote for the parliamentarian who we believe to be the right person, irrespective of what party they represent. If they're a good Zimbabwean, a capable Zimbabwean, and they are offering themselves to save this nation, you should support them. Support them ahead of a poor candidate coming from some other party. That is beginning for me to mean you understand democracy. And if we do this, we are going to get our parliament as an example with a mix of people representing ZANU, representing APA, representing MDC, and independents who are thoughtful, who are not constrained by party discipline, who will debate issues on the merit of those issues and on what they believe and offer the citizens of this country what is right. So I know that there is a lot of dust flying out there criticizing these young people. I actually think that these young people need to be applauded. They need to be celebrated for their stance of standing as independent, and they will push the boundary and force the political parties to similarly begin to look for quality candidates in order to compete. These young people force political parties to understand that you cannot continue to get away with second-rate people. So I celebrate this. Let me maybe illustrate my point. Just in case there is a risk of you thinking that I have implied in any shape or form that ZANU as a political party is full of 100% bad people. That's just not is true. So I am saying in ZANU I know there are bad people and good people. In MDC I also know there are good and bad people. I want you candidate by candidate rather than through the umbrella of a party. And in APA, similarly, there is going to be good and bad people. APA is not going to be an aberration. I will admit and submit to you that as citizens, this is a huge opportunity for you to candidate by candidate, vote for the right person. I want to use a couple of illustrations, and yeah, I know I might be putting my foot in it, but I'm going to do it anyway. I want to use the example of people in ZANU. In my opinion, somebody like Chidzero was a good ZANU person, good, capable, morally upright, good value system. He was let down by a party. So if somebody like Chidzero stood in a particular constituency, I would say absolutely vote for him. Vote for him not because he belongs to ZANU. Vote for him because he is competent, his value system is right. Let me use the example of somebody I know, I happen to know him well, and again, I'll put my foot in it because I think illustrations are very important. Somebody like Simba Makoni. I know Simba, I've known him, as you know, I supported him in 2008, and Zimbabwe had an opportunity to depart from third-rate leadership, but for whatever reason, we chose not to do it. I have known Simba as a good, capable Zimbabwean who happened at some point to belong to ZANU. But because he could see that his club was not a good club, he walked away. So I'm saying to you as Zimbabwean citizens, let us take a step back and look at all these political parties and say from today on, I will not vote for a political party. I'll vote for individuals within political parties who happen to be good, capable Zimbabweans with a good value system. If we do this, I can guarantee right next year, we'll get a country which will function like never before. So as far as I'm concerned, I applaud all the young people who presented themselves yesterday under the umbrella of POVO. Well done. Keep it up. Have a go at it. Don't be discouraged. There will be a lot of criticism out there. You are doing the right thing, and I like that you've got the courage you had the courage to come out and do it. So let me conclude on that note to entertain a few questions and see what is on your mind. So that's my spiel for tonight, and thank you for listening. So I'm available to take specific questions. Keith Ndlovu, would you vote for Chamisa and why not? Well, he's implying that he knows I wouldn't. You're asking me a direct question. The answer is no, I would not vote for Chamisa because I don't think he's got the skills that my country requires. I've just articulated what I think a leader at this point in time in our country should understand. Our leader has to understand how an economy works above all. I don't believe that Chamisa has got that understanding. I'm sorry. If he did, I would join MDC and support him. But democracy is beautiful because you are free to vote for him. I personally will not vote for him because I genuinely do not believe that somebody who does not understand the intricacies of finance, which lead directly into how you support investment, what creates confidence and credibility, can get us out of the mess we are in. So I wouldn't. How do I feel the our presidential campaign is going? I think it's going very well, as I attempted to share with you at the beginning. We are engaging with people, and what I'm getting is that people are very appreciative of us going to them and giving people an opportunity to talk to us, as opposed to us preaching to them. So it's a dialogue, an exchange, where a big component of it is us hearing them, hearing their daily concerns, what goes on in their lives, as opposed to us pretending that we know what's going on in their lives in all parts of this country. So the campaign is going incredibly well. Thanks very much. How do I propose to get all these talented individuals across the public? So this issue comes back to leadership. If I were a head of state, as I've said, we in APA have accepted the principle that we want competent and capable Zimbabweans. If an APA government comes to be, APA people understand that they will not necessarily be the people going to cabinet. We'll look at people in ZANU, we'll look at people in MDC, we'll look at our people abroad, the diaspora, we'll look at people who don't belong to any political party at all, and invite them to create the strongest cabinet, put the best foot forward that we can, in order to get technically competent people to help us get out of the hole that we've been digging for ourselves all these years. That's how to do it. Somebody says, let's call a spade a spade. Chamisa has got a big number of followers. You know, my view of this is that we as Zimbabweans, as citizens, need to take a responsibility and say, you know that adage, people get the leaders they deserve. If we've got an opportunity to vote and we vote for somebody who we know is not equipped with the tools that we need, then when they fail to deliver, we just have to take the responsibility. That's what we chose for ourselves. We cannot continue to blame somebody else when we've got an opportunity, firstly, to have clarity about what the job that needs to be done is and what the skills required to get somebody to do that job are. And then we go and mismatch the two. Then we must accept responsibility that we are where we are because we choose to be. Well, somebody's making a comment about bullet trains. I'll leave that. I'm not going to go into that space. I leave you to deal with it. Bullet trains, yes. Like I told you, I think there are foundations to be laid. You can aim to go to the moon, build rockets to go to the moon if you want, but I think a lot of Zimbabweans who are dealing with real daily-to-day survival issues will look at you and think, so what did we do? Somebody is asking about strategy on agriculture. We have got the land, and we've got Zimbabweans who are doing, incidentally, I think some of you might have listened to Thabo Mbeki. He gave a speech once where he talked about a farm owned by black people in South Africa. He deliberately didn't say who these black people were. And ultimately down the line, he said, oh, by the way, I forgot to tell you that these are Zimbabweans. Again, the same issue that I was mentioning about. You go to ESCOM. The engineers running ESCOM today, a lot of them are Zimbabweans. You go to mining in South Africa. The miners running the mining operations in South Africa today, the large number of them are Zimbabweans. All these people are here. When I say here, they are there, we produce them. We just don't, we settle for third-rate people. And this puzzles me. And we continue to fight to give responsibility to people who don't have the skills and competencies to run our country and get surprised when we end up where we are. And again, let me go back to sport. We've got football teams, we've got netball teams, whatever teams. You know that a nation that wants a winning team will select the best people to man that team. Running a country, forming an executive to run a team, a country, cannot be any different. People have got different talents, different skills. And if we think we can form a winning team by ignoring those who are competent, who then go elsewhere and think we can select people politically, tribally, on a regional basis and put together a winning team, then we just need to rethink. And I think we need to have an honest conversation amongst ourselves rather than try to beat about the bush. We are shooting ourselves in the foot through what we do. Let's get real. And this country's got the talent. The evidence or the outcomes of this country are not reflective of the talent that we have. So let's get it sorted out. Yeah, somebody's just making an observation how you can think about a bullet train when there is Harare has had no water for 15 years. Some parts of Harare. Let's fix that. Let's form the let's fix the things that are foundational to then us being very ambitious and aiming to get to bullet trains, but let's fix the foundations. What criteria am I going to use to select my cabinet? Meritocracy. There is lots of Zimbabweans who are capable, competent people. We're going to, as I've said already, we're going to have a policy of 50-50 gender balance. We're going to have junior ministers because the youth need to be, their energy, their innovativeness has to be harnessed by having junior ministers. So I've articulated all these things. Shrink the cabinet, make it competent through using meritocracy, make sure there is 50-50 gender balance so that we don't leave 50% of our human resource unutilized. Make sure that there is room for young people by creating junior ministers to make sure that they are at the table where decisions are being made, policy being debated, serve an apprenticeship as well as inject the energy and innovativeness that only young people can bring to the table. That's how we're going to do it. Here's a good one. And I propose to make this one the last comment I want to make. So there is this fixation with 100 days plan. And it's fascinating again for me. In a typical, and I'm going to use a corporate as an example, but I'll come back to a country because the process is exactly the same. You are an outsider, somebody's running a company, and they're messing it up. But as an outsider, the truth is, you actually do not know the full picture or the facts of what's going on, or what we call a baseline. You don't have a baseline. You sit there on the outside and you go crazy about promising what you'll have delivered in 100 days. If there was ever anything that demonstrates a lack of management understanding, it is that. You cannot make a plan for whatever period, 100 days, 6 months, 5 years, when you do not know where you are starting from. And unfortunately, the reality in our country is that all of the people who are outside government have got no clue in terms of what the detail of where our country is today, what those details are. So the first task of any responsible manager, whether of a country or a company, is to establish the baseline. Before you can make any promises about 100 days plan, you need to know where you are starting from in very concrete ways. So I need to know the facts about what our revenues are, what the detail of what's happening in our agriculture is. I need to know in very minute detail those facts before I can then say, okay, this is where I'm starting from, and given where I'm starting from, I can realistically make plans which say I can achieve the following because I'll need these resources realistically in this time frame. So when you articulate a baseline, a 100-day plan, please give us any indication of what the baseline is. Do you really know where you are starting from? Without showing us the baseline, don't talk about 100 days or 6 months or 5 years or whatever, because it's got no meaning whatsoever without knowing where you're starting from. Establish first where you're starting from. And then let's have a conversation about where you intend to go and how long it's going to take you to get there. Thank you very much. We're going to do this regularly, so I know that I've not covered half the stuff that you'd like to us to cover today, but these will become regular, and my team and I will sit and figure out the frequency, and we'll pick up some of these. I've not answered all your questions, but we'll do these and make it as regular as possible. Thank you, and good night, and have a very good Easter. In spite of the economic circumstances, I hope that you and your families can take a break and rest to the extent that your resource base allows you to do so. Thank you, and good night.